44th stop on the C-SPAN Bus 50 Capitals Tour. Connecticut Secretary of State Denise Merrill will be our guest on the bus during Washington Journal, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern.
Next, a Nevada 3rd District House debate between Democrat Susie Lee and Republican Danny Tarkanian. The congressional seat is currently held by Democrat Jacky Rosen, who's running for the Senate. The Cook Political Report lists the race as leaning Democrat. Courtesy of KLAS-TV in Las Vegas, this is 45 Minutes.
From your local election headquarters, welcome to the Congressional District 3 debate. Democratic candidate and businesswoman Susie Lee from Las Vegas and Republican candidate and businessman Danny Tarkanian, also from Las Vegas, go head-to-head in our debate. From your local election headquarters and the 8 News Now studios in Las Vegas, the Congressional District 3 debate starts now.
Welcome to our Congressional District 3 debate between Republican Danny Tarkanian and Democrat Susie Lee. I'm Steve Sebelius, and my Politics Now co-host Patrick Walker and I will be the moderators.
Danny Tarkanian is an attorney and businessman who is making his 6th run for office, and philanthropist and businesswoman Susie Lee is running for Congress for the 2nd time. We want to extend a big thank you to both for agreeing to the debate. They both met our criteria, which includes raising at least $50,000, at least $12,500 of that from Nevadans, and having a campaign office and website. You can see the full list of criteria on LasVegasNow.com. The format for this debate will include questions for both candidates to answer, individual questions for each candidate, and closing statements.
We're going to start with questions for both candidates. They'll each have 60 seconds to answer. That is followed by a 30-second rebuttal for each candidate. When your time is up, you will hear this bell. If either moderator asks a follow-up question, the candidates will have 30 seconds to answer that as well. There are no opening statements, so let's jump right into it. The anniversary of the October 1st shooting is less than 2 weeks away. It was a moment that brought Las Vegans together, but also put the debate about gun violence on the forefront of American minds. Both of you have different ideas about how to solve gun violence. Here's what each of you said after the October 1st shooting.
I'm for banning bump stocks, reducing the size of magazines, and most importantly, getting weapons out of the hands of dangerous individuals.
I'm going to go there. Yeah, I will go there and try to find whatever's best solution we can, gun control, whatever otherwise, to minimize these type of activities within the framework of our Constitution.
Danny Tarkanian won the card draw, so he will answer first. Mr. Tarkanian, name the one piece of federal gun legislation that's your top priority to pass, and tell us why.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank Channel 8 for having this debate. I think it's very important for the viewers, and particularly the residents of Congressional District 3, to be able to listen to both candidates, be able to see what we have to say policy-wise outside of those 30-second TV ads that too much control these type of elections. So thank you very much. We've offered to do 3 debates and 3 town halls. We look forward to doing more after today. I believe that we should have a universal background check, maybe an exception for immediate family members, like where a father is giving something to a teenager son. But there should be background checks for anybody who's going to purchase weapons. And that's one of the things that differentiates me from some of the other Republicans that have run for office. In fact, it's caused me to be downgraded by the NRA. But I think it's a common sense solution. We believe that everybody has a constitutional right to bear arms, but there should be a background check to make sure dangerous felons and people with mental illnesses do not have control of those guns.
Thank you, Mr. Tarkanian. Ms. Lee, what's your one top priority for federal gun legislation and why?
First of all, thank you both for having me here today to discuss these issues. You know, October 1st, I think, changed this community and forever. I picked my son, who's 13 years old, up from school the following day. He got in the car and started crying, saying, you know, this guy didn't even know who he was shooting. And as a mother, I couldn't say to him, it's okay, I can protect you, it won't happen again. You know, we've seen 33,000 people killed by guns in our country. I believe in the Second Amendment right. We have a strong culture of gun, people who like to hunt. I respect that people want to protect their families, but the issue is, how do we make the Second Amendment safer? I agree the first piece of legislation should be universal background checks, keeping guns out of the hands of criminals and people who shouldn't are mentally unstable and shouldn't have it, which has been passed here by Nevada voters.
Thank you. Mr. Tarkanian, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
Well, I'm glad that my opponent agrees with this common sense principle, and I certainly agree with it. And I will say that this was living in this community for 45 years, grown up here, and we've seen some really great events here and some really tough things. Nothing was worse than that shooting. It devastated this community in a lot of ways. But at the same time, we came together. We showed what kind of community we are, and that we're all Vegas strong. And I'm very proud to be a part of this.
Ms. Lee, 30 seconds for you.
You know, there's been a slight change in my opponent's opinion on guns. Basically, in his previous elections, he has talked about not even having background checks and keeping guns out of the hands of people who would be on our no-fly list. So there's been a little change in a position here. I've been pretty steadfast that we need to have universal background checks, and I backed the initiative that we supported in Nevada here 2 years ago.
Let's move on to immigration now. Immigration dominated the 2016 presidential election. Many people believe it put President Trump in the White House, and it has dominated local races here in Nevada, so we're going to ask each of you about your border security plans. According to Reuters, a Department of Homeland Security internal report in 2017 pegged the cost of Trump's border security plan at $21.6 billion. So, Ms. Lee, you're first on this one. Don't we need to have a stronger barrier at the southern border, if for no other reason than to dissuade terrorism? And how much would you be willing to spend to accomplish border security, increase border security at the southern border?
You know, immigration is the one issue to me that most exemplifies the dysfunction in Washington, D.C. We've had bipartisan solutions for comprehensive immigration reform on the table over and over again, and it's never been brought to vote because of leadership on both sides of the aisle. You know, I believe in strong borders, and which is why I'm proud that the Nevada Coalition of Law Enforcement has endorsed my campaign representing over 10,000 law enforcement officers here in the state of Nevada. I think we can have cost-effective border security, and we certainly need to do it, and it needs to be the first part of comprehensive immigration reform. I don't necessarily believe that a wall all the way along the southern border is necessarily the answer. We can do it with fences. We can do it with securing our ports of entry as well.
Mr. Tarkanian, you are a fiscal conservative, so we talk about that cost, about $21.5 billion. Exactly how much are you willing to spend on a border security wall or a plan like that?
First of all, I'm going to have to correct my opponent, and we may have to do this regularly throughout this debate. The no-fly ban for guns is done without giving anybody due process rights. It's a violation of our Second Amendment. She should be in favor of that if she believes in the Constitution. I believe it's very important to secure our borders. It's one of the most important things our country needs to do. In fact, it's one of the main purposes of our federal government is to defend the safety of our citizens from outside forces. I don't know what the cost is going to be. A wall is going to be important in certain areas. It's not going to be feasible in other areas, but we have technology that can fully secure the borders. If we need more border patrol agents or other type of ways to make sure we protect who's coming in our country and what type of products, you didn't mention that, we certainly want to stop all these drugs that are coming in our country. And so it's vital, vital, vital to have secure borders, and we have to pay whatever cost it is with the most feasible approach possible to make sure that's done.
Ms. Lee, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal, but would you also, can you give us a number of what you'd be willing to spend for some of those at the border?
You know, our security as a country, I'm not willing to put a price tag on it. I think that we need to look at cost-effective ways of doing it. You know, again, we can use drone technology, we can use fences, we can use tighter security at ports of entry. There's a slew. I don't have an estimate right now, but I don't want to put a price on securing our country.
And Mr. Tarkanian, you also have 30 seconds to rebut. Are you comfortable with that number at 21 plus billion?
That number is based upon a full border wall, which I don't think is feasible, as I mentioned in my earlier conversations. But we need to secure borders with whatever means we have and with whatever cost it takes. That's reasonable. Unfortunately, when you talk about the comprehensive immigration reform, my opponent talked about that part as it agreed upon. None of it talked about securing our borders and making sure we stop illegal people coming in and illegal drugs coming in. And that's the most important thing for our federal government.
Okay, thank you both. Stay with us, our CD3 debate. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our Congressional District 3 debates.
Well, funding for the Clark County School District has been an ongoing issue here in Southern Nevada. This school year, according to the district, $341 million of funding is from federal sources, and $136 million of that is for free and reduced lunches. So, Mr. Tarkanian, you can answer this question first with a minute to reply. As a member of Congress, what programs would you vote for to ensure that children who are living in poverty have the same educational opportunities as everyone else?
And that's a great question, and it's one of the most important questions facing our residents in Congressional District 3. I believe very strongly in school choice, that people that are at the lower level of the economy scale can still pick and choose which is the best school system for their children to participate in. Unfortunately now, only the real wealthy people. My opponent, she's able to send her children over to private boarding school, spend $75,000 a year for it. I'm able to send my kids to private school, cost $400 a month, but we're fortunate enough to do that because we care, like every other parent, so much for the well-being and the education of their children. But what about the people that can't afford it? Why aren't they given that same opportunity? They all pay taxes, they all care just as much for their children, so the top priority for me will get school choice passed federally so every child, no matter what economic scale they're on, can go to the school that's best for them.
Ms. Lee, you can answer next. What programs would you vote for to ensure that children living in poverty have the same educational opportunities as everyone else?
You know, I have a strong career here in Nevada working with our most impoverished students, helping them have the opportunity to be successful in school. For the past 6 years, I've been the board president of Communities and Schools, part of the nation's leading dropout prevention program. And under my leadership, we've grown sixfold, and today we now serve 64,000 students, getting a graduation rate of 87%. This is an example of a smart public-private partnership that utilizes, each principal has a decision to use part of their money that they get for helping impoverished students, which is Title I funding. And we go in and help students with basic needs, food, clothing, health care, etc. It's a smart program and it gets great results. And that's a program that I'd fight for to make sure that all students have that. And with respect to choice, I'm not asking taxpayers to pay for my choice to send my kids to a private school, but I've been fighting so kids can have an opportunity at good education for 20 years.
Mr. Tarkanian, you've got 30 seconds to reply.
This is a clear distinction between my opponent and I. She would rather take money from the Clark County School District and the federal government to fund these special projects like that she's running right now. For example, the nonprofit she's talking about, it takes $1.6 million from the school budget to fund their programs. They pay 10% of that to fund the CEO. I think the money should go in the classroom, to the teachers, their assistants, the books. Money should be put in the classroom where it belongs, not in these special projects like my opponent is talking about.
Ms. Lee, 30 seconds.
Wow. This is a man who got a $17 million bailout by the federal government. And not only that, the programs that I fund are a public-private partnership. We get results. 87% of the students that we serve under Communities and Schools graduate. Many of those students would have a graduation rate of about 10%. So I've proven that I can roll up my sleeves, take on the big problems, and get results while you've conned everyone you've come in contact with.
Mr. Tarkanian, a follow-up question for you. You mentioned school choice in your initial answer. How much money from the federal government would you be willing to put behind that program?
Well, first of all, we got to respond to her. Again, she's going to lie to the public like she is in her ads. There was no bailout from the federal government. You should know that, Mr. Sebelius. You even had to write the, whatever you want to call it, correction in your article. It was from the insurance companies because my family was defrauded from a developer and a banker. We were defrauded, so the con is really in her. She ran the only other nonprofit she talks about, took $5 million from the city and the county, this MASH program. She does really well running nonprofits when the government pays for her profits and including all of the salaries that she pays to her employees and her CEO.
All right, Ms. Lee, can you tell us how much money would you like to spend on childhood education and poverty programs? 30 seconds to reply.
Listen, 1 in 5 children live in poverty in our country. 66% of students in the Clark County School District are on free and reduced lunch. You know, I believe that early childhood education is a good return on investment dollar, and I'd like to see more investment with that. I can't really put a price tag on, you know, exactly what the total will be, but we have a serious poverty problem here in Nevada. I've proven that I can solve that problem with the organizations that I've run.
We have many more issues to get to, so we'll leave it there. Stay with us. Our CD3 debate continues after this.
Welcome back to our Congressional District 3 debate.
Well, both of you say that you want to bring small businesses and jobs back here to Nevada to diversify the state's economy. Mr. Tarkanian, you're first on this one. Which specific federal policies would you propose to accomplish this?
Well, I think we're seeing that right now with some of the policies that President Trump is implementing. We're seeing a reduction in the burdensome regulations that allow small businesses to start up and expand. We're seeing a more fair tax system, particularly to corporations, so that they can go out and compete. We're seeing the greatest economic turnaround in my generation, and here in Southern Nevada we have $50 billion in new construction projects planned here within the Clark County itself. It's because of these type of policies that are expanding the business. The one area that I think we need to do a better job for is to correct the problems Dodd-Frank did when they eliminated the community banks, or at least significantly reduced them. The community banks are necessary for small businesses in their communities because they're the ones that lend to the mom and pop organizations, or the ones that want to expand. So I'd like to get back to really putting some resources into the community bank system.
Ms. Lee, same question to you with a minute to respond. Which specific federal policies would you propose to bring small businesses and jobs to Nevada to diversify our economy?
You know, diversifying our economy has been an issue that I've been concerned about ever since I moved here 25 years ago, which is why I've gotten invested in our community in helping nonprofits. Basically, I think it starts obviously with education, and you know, for every dollar that we as a state send to Washington, we only get 66 cents back in return. So I think we need to be laser focused on making sure we're getting education and research dollars back here from the federal government to support sectors that we need to advance. We always have a deficit in teachers. We need to grow our own teachers. We know that Nevada State College is building an addition to help us with that. Healthcare, we're underserviced in healthcare. We also have opportunities in green energy, drone technology, as well as cybersecurity and IT. And so those are areas that I'd focus on, bringing education and research dollars back here to support those businesses.
Mr. Tarkanian, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
I think Nevada has a great opportunity to be the leader in renewable energy, and this is where my opponent and I disagree. Her policies would make Yucca Mountain a storage facility for nuclear spent fuel. I think if we work with the federal government and we turn it into a recycling facility, you're going to recycle the nuclear spent fuel, be able to sell it nationally and internationally, but at the same time bring in the wind, solar, and geothermal resources that we have here. You can turn Yucca Mountain into the leading energy renewal facility in the entire world, and it'll create more jobs and it'll create more money for the people of Nevada.
Ms. Lee, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal as well.
Well, first of all, we don't disagree on investing in clean energy. I've been very clear that I support, and I think Nevada should be a leader in that. This is different than your earlier proposal for Yucca Mountain, which was turning it into a reprocessing facility, which means transporting waste on our roads and railways, which honestly, to me, is an economic killer for our state.
Well, there's more issues just ahead. Stay with us. The CD3 debate continues right after this.
Welcome back to our Congressional District 3 debate. For this next part of the debate, we will ask the candidates individual questions. So here are the rules. Candidates have 60 seconds to answer. The other candidate will not have a chance to rebut these answers. And if Steve or I ask a follow-up question, the candidate will have 30 seconds to answer that. So, Mr. Tarkanian, we'll begin with you. You have said that the federal government regulations hurt small business people here in Nevada. Can you name 3 federal regulations you would eliminate and why?
Look, first of all, I need to again correct one of the statements my opponent made. Recycling is reprocessing. It's the same thing. I've been consistent upon it all the time. And furthermore, nuclear spent fuel has been transported through the states of Nevada for decades. There hasn't been an accident yet. I didn't say regulations hurt small businesses. I said burdensome and unnecessary regulations hurt small businesses. I've gone throughout this community and throughout the state before, and anytime you talk to a small business, they talk about how long and how difficult it is to get through the red tape of getting the businesses started. For example, I had a gentleman up in out here that started a manufacturing plant here, and he said regulators would come in, they would search every wire, every spark plug, every thing in their entire plant, and would cause them to shut down their business. It would cause them a lot of money to try to cover all these type of things. Why aren't we working together to try to make the place, the employment area safe, but at the same time feasible for businesses to work and expand?
Okay, with a hard 30 seconds to follow up, are there any specific regulations that you would like to see changed?
Well, if you would like to give me an example of some of them, we can do some. President Trump has already eliminated 5 regulations for every one that's being passed now. There's so many of them out there. If we want to discuss each one, we can see which ones are reasonable or not. Common sense would tell you which ones are reasonable. I firmly believe we need to protect the safety of our employees, and at the same time protect our environment. But at the same time, you shouldn't be putting unnecessary burdens on businesses when it isn't having a positive effect for it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tarkanian.
Susie Lee, you're next. Based on what you've seen thus far, do you think that there is enough evidence to impeach President Trump? And based on what you've seen, would you vote for the impeachment of President Trump if it came up and you were elected?
You know, if I get elected, I hope that voters understand what I've done here in this community and why I'm running. And if I have the honor of serving Congressional District 3, I think that impeachment discussions would be a distraction. I think that, especially if we have a majority, I'd like to get to work on issues that are affecting Nevada families here, reducing health care costs, improving our education system, and economic development, and by that I mean an economy that works for everyone. Those are the issues that are facing Nevadans. That being said, I think the investigation should continue. I think it's incredibly dangerous that Russia interfered in our elections, and I think we should have an investigation and allow it to continue. But I'd like to really get to work on solving problems facing working families here.
And just a real quick follow-up with a few seconds to respond. There are many members of your party in Congress who have called for the impeachment of President Trump. Do you disagree with them?
Yeah, I'm not always with extreme factions of my party on certain issues, and which is why I'm proud that No Labels has given me the seal of approval. No Labels is an organization that supports candidates that are dedicated on bringing Congress together to solve
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks for watching the first half of our Congressional District 3 debate. The second half will be next Saturday, September 29th at 4:30 p.m.
Topics include health care and who the candidates would like to see as their party's leader in the House.
Well, you have both called for changes to our current health care system, either by repealing the Affordable Care Act or replacing parts of it. Both of you have cited the rising costs of health care as reasons why. So, Ms. Lee, we'll begin with you. You are first on the question with a minute to respond. Tell us a specific policy that you would champion to rein in the cost of health care while also covering the most people.
This issue is incredibly personal to me. My father was laid off at the age of 57. I grew up in Ohio. He was part of the Rust Belt, and unfortunately was unable to find work comparable to what he had. My mother suffered a heart attack at the age of 64. They both had pre-existing conditions and were not able to afford health insurance, and almost lost their home because of the cost of her treatment in the hospital. So making sure that we're covering pre-existing conditions is incredibly important. The Affordable Care Act is not perfect. It is, but we saw a 42% increase in uninsured people in Nevada who now have access to health insurance. So I believe that we can take steps to rein in the costs of health insurance. I want to see subsidies that help middle and low income families afford health insurance. I think that can be one of the changes.
Mr. Tarkanian, same question. Give me a specific policy that you would champion to rein in the cost of health care while also providing the greatest blanket of coverage to the most people. You have a minute.
The entire conversation with my opponent, you never mentioned how she'd bring down costs, except having more federal subsidies, which are paid for by the taxpayers. That's not reining down costs. The problem with the Affordable Care Act is it's not affordable. It's too costly for the middle class, hardworking Americans who are stuck having to pay their own health insurance premiums, like my family. Our health premiums went up from $480 a month to $1,840. Our deductibles from $1,000 to $5,000, and our copay to see a specialist $25 to $150. 50. My son had a stroke when he was 4.5. He's going to have a pre-existing condition the entire life. It's not fair to make people with pre-existing conditions pay more. So and that's one of the things already in the Affordable Care Act. That's not going to drive down the prices. There are many things that you could do to drive down the prices. Allowing people to purchase insurance across state lines. Every time we create more competition in our country, we get a better product at a lower cost. And also getting the healthcare system more into the free market principles, where there's more competition, more options. The Unaffordable Care Act has limited our options. Only 2 insurance companies here in Clark County and only 1 in 14 other counties.
Ms. Lee, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
You know, if you repeal the Affordable Care Act, you repeal protections for pre-existing conditions. That's just a fact. And what has happened under this Republican administration is basically whittling away at those protections. And more than that, the tax bill that was passed, we're going to see over an $800 increase in premiums for Nevada families.
Mr. Tarkanian, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
Well, first of all, there is a way to repeal the Affordable Care Act and pass something else that would have pre-existing conditions of protection, and that's what should happen. And you talk about an $800 increase in our health insurance policies. I just discussed with you, mine went up with over $1,000 since Obamacare has been passed, and I'm a typical middle-class, hardworking Nevadan who pays for her own health insurance.
Well, this issue came up in the first part of our debate, but let's talk more in depth about Yucca Mountain. Mr. Tarkanian, in February of this year, you told the Nevada Appeal, quote, "With Yucca Mountain, Nevada has the opportunity to become a world leader in the reprocessing of nuclear fuel and eliminate 97% of our country's nuclear waste. In pushing to revive the project, the Trump administration recognizes how important Yucca Mountain is to Nevada and America," unquote. And Ms. Lee, on your campaign website, you say, quote, "I am staunchly opposed to dumping the nation's nuclear waste in our backyard. It's a matter of when, not if, there will be a devastating accident," end quote. So for Mr. Tarkanian, with a minute to reply, how can you assure Nevadans that the transportation and reprocessing of nuclear waste at Nevada will be safe?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, we have a serious problem right now because we have 100 above ground sites where nuclear spent fuel is currently stored. One of them 300 miles plus outside of Las Vegas, right next to San Diego and Los Angeles. If you're talking about a catastrophe happen, that's where it's going to happen. Second of all, we have been transporting nuclear spent fuel through the state for over 3 decades now, and there hasn't been an accident yet. We could try to fight the federal government and say we're not going to do anything here with Yucca Mountain, and they're going to force Yucca Mountain to be a storage facility, which nobody wants here in Southern Nevada. My alternative is a responsible alternative. It solves the problems of the currently above ground sites. It solves the problems of reprocessing and not storing it here in Nevada. It would create millions, if not billions of dollars for the people of Nevada that we could put into our education system, into our healthcare system. It would create thousands of high paying jobs and make UNLV and UNR into the leading research institutions in the entire world. It's a responsible alternative.
Ms. Lee, to you on this issue, why would you oppose Yucca Mountain if it does have the economic benefits that Mr. Tarkanian just mentioned, and if the people in the community where it will be located seem to want the project?
You know, I'm going to join bipartisan leaders in this state since 1987 who have fought this dangerous concept of transporting nuclear, and by the way, it's high-level nuclear waste. There is nuclear waste being transported on our roads, but it's low-level. So we're talking about high-level nuclear waste being transported, basically on the railroad right behind the strip, on our highways. And again, it's not a matter of if, it's not a matter of when. And I'm here to represent Congressional District 3, and our economic engine for our state is our tourism economy, and this is a dangerous concept. And not only that, reprocessing waste is a naive concept. First of all, the copious amounts of water it takes. Secondly, all of the plants, nuclear plants in this country, are being decommissioned. They're at the end of their useful life. Who's buying this reprocessed fuel? I mean, if anything, there's just going to be storing our fuel. And by the way, the DOE has lied to us before.
Mr. Tarkanian, 30 seconds to
low-level nuclear spent fuel will cause the same catastrophe as high level. It's just a talking point trying to scare the public. It's still nuclear spent fuel going through our state. Now, again, another scare tactic is where my opponent says you're going to bring it through railroad tracks through Las Vegas. If we work with the federal government, we can find a place through rural Nevada where it's not going to be going through. Second, the last thing is France reprocesses 97% of their nuclear spent fuel. It works for them. It's a clean energy. It would work here for Nevada, and it would work for our country. It's the responsible solution.
Ms. Lee, 30 seconds for you.
Again, I'm just going to say I'm going to join bipartisan leadership who since 1987 has fought this incredibly dangerous idea. It's dangerous to the health of our community, and it's dangerous to our economy. And I think that we have an opportunity to become a leader in clean energy and use that to be our economic driver, not storing the nation's high-level nuclear waste here.
Thank you very much, and stay with us. The CD3 debate will be right back.
Welcome back to our Congressional District 3 debate. One of the biggest threats to Nevada is the potential for running out of water. Right now, the Bureau of Reclamation says there is a 52% chance the government will declare federal shortage conditions on the river in the next 2 years, and that chance continues to increase through 2021 and 2022. The Colorado River has been over-allocated for some 8 decades. It is the most litigated river in the U.S., which makes it difficult to come up with some solutions. So, Ms. Lee, I'll begin with you. What would you do to ensure the future of the Colorado River and Lake Mead for Nevadans?
You know, prior to moving to Las Vegas, I worked for an environmental consulting firm and actually dealt with water issues, and it is an incredibly complicated issue. So many actors and so many states involved. You know, I'm proud that I will be a bipartisan leader, and I think that's what it's going to take to solve this issue. We have to work with the Colorado River Commission, with states, you know, California, Arizona, Utah, and, you know, I mean, basically our water policy right now in this country does not lend itself to conserving water. So, you know, it's going to be a matter of we run into crisis situation in California that's going to bring them to the table. But honestly, we all need to come to the table. I know the Water Authority has led the way in terms of conserving, and we need to continue to do that. But it's really about reaching across the aisle, bringing people to the table, and coming up with a regional solution. And with a minute to reply, Mr. Tarkanian, same question. If you're in Congress, elected to Congress, what would you do to ensure the future of the Colorado River?
This very, very serious problem facing Clark County and much of the western United States isn't going to be solved by general talking points and claiming you're going to work bipartisanship. You need to have solutions, some common sense solutions. I believe we need to bring in a pipeline from up in the Washington, Seattle, Vancouver area that has excess snow and waterfall that goes into the Pacific Ocean, bring that all the way down into Southern California or Northern California. Northern California could then fill the water needs for the Southern California area, and then Nevada would get more of the Lake Mead and Colorado River portion of it. It's got to be a common sense solution, and you have to work with other states, and it's going to be costly. But we can spend $3 trillion fighting wars overseas that we had no business fighting with over there. We could spend $1.2 billion a year putting troops in South Korea for, what is 70, 80 years. But we can't take care of a water shortage that is crucial to the western United States, including here in Clark County. I will work with both parties with common sense solutions.
Ms. Lee, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. You know what? I mean, this water shortage obviously is part of climate change. And we as a country need to take some serious steps to reduce the impact of climate change here in our country. And there are many possible solutions to the water crisis, including a desalinization plant in Mexico and then using their allocation. Again, you need to come to the table and have a conversation and set priorities and set a strategy. And Mr. Tarkanian, 30 seconds for your rebuttal.
The desalinization would not work unless the Mexico government approves it, and California is fighting. They won't do it because of environmental problems it would cause. I don't think that's the right solution. The one I gave you I think is much better. But again, I've lived in this community for 45 years. It isn't climate change that's causing the water shortage. It's the growth of the number of people living in this community as it is in Southern California. It isn't going to be solved by using talking points about climate change. We have to bring in more water from the sources that are available right now.
President Trump and Republicans have said passing a budget is a priority for Congress. They blamed Democrats during the Obama administration for failing to pass the budget when they controlled the House. But 2 years into the new administration, there still has not been a formal budget adopted. So both of you have expressed frustration at the inability to accomplish this most basic constitutional task. So, Mr. Tarkanian, you're first on this one with a minute to reply. Are there any circumstances under which you would vote to shut down the federal government over the lack of a budget?
Look, this is a problem with Washington, D.C. It's dysfunction, and it's why so many people distrust their politicians, because they can't make the tough choices. We need people in Washington, D.C. that are going to work for the betterment of the people in our communities and in our country, and that means you're going to have to give in to some things that you don't agree with that the other party wants, so that they'll give you some of the things that you don't agree with. Right now we have partisanship that says we're not going to do anything for you if we don't get everything, and vice versa. I'm going to work with both parties to get that done. Would I shut down the government? I'm not the kind of guy that says this is a line in the sand. We're not going to fund anything if you don't give me everything I want. As Harry Reid once said, and I hate to quote Harry Reid, but Harry Reid once said, legislation is the art of compromise. You have to compromise, but you want people in there that are going to be working hard to get the best terms possible for what they believe in, and that's what I will do.
Ms. Lee, you're next. Are there any circumstances in which you would vote to shut down the federal government over the lack of a budget?
You know, the dysfunction in Washington and the divisiveness is precisely why I decided to run for Congress, because I'm fed up with Washington more concerned about party over our country, about special interests over working families. And I have, like I said, I have the seal of approval from No Labels. I intend to be part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is one Democrat joins with the Republican. It's up to 48 now, and really focused on trying to bring us together to have solutions. 2006 was the last time we had a full budget passed in this country, and we've had 30 continuing resolutions for the past 10 years. I believe that we need to start to work together. We need to have changes in rules so that Congress can start working for the middle of America again.
Mr. Tarkanian, 30 seconds.
Again, my opponent talks about the dysfunction of Washington, D.C., and then she quotes the No Labels group, and she talks about other type of committees within Washington, D.C. The problem is it's not a party problem. It's a Washington, D.C. problem. It's the Republicans at fault, the Democrats at fault. We need to bring people in Washington, D.C. that's going to stand up to those people. I've done that from the time I've been an adult. I've been a fighter. I never give up. That's what we need in Washington, D.C. to get this done.
Ms. Lee, 30 seconds to you.
Danny, you're trying to con voters like you've conned everyone you've worked with. And the bottom line is, you said in your last debate just a few months ago that Donald Trump has a solid vote for you because he endorsed you, and you'll be with him. And this is an issue where I am making a pledge to work across the aisle to solve problems, and that's exactly what I've done in this community, which is why I've gotten the results here and what I plan to do in Congress.
All right, well, stay with us. The debate will be right back with individual questions for both candidates.
Welcome back. For this next part of the debate, we will be asking individual questions of each of the candidates. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer, and there will be no rebuttal from the other candidate. If the moderator asks a follow-up question, you will have 30 seconds to answer it.
Ms. Lee, you have the first individual question. If elected, one of the first votes that you will cast in Congress is to select your party's next minority leader or speaker. Would you vote for California Democrat Nancy Pelosi as your party leader if you're elected?
You know, as I am out talking to people in Nevada, the big issue that they ask me about is health care, education, and bringing here jobs that pay the bills. You know, I believe that America wants and Nevada wants a Congress that works together. So I'm going to support a leader who is going to adopt rule changes that are going to move the Congress more towards the middle. Like I said, I am going to be part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. There's proposals called Break the Gridlock, and I'm going to ask that the next leader sign on to rule changes that will help keep the fringe from controlling Congress. That being said, I will also support a leader who opposes Yucca Mountain.
With 30 seconds for a follow-up, is that leader Nancy Pelosi? I didn't hear you say yes or no.
First of all, I'm not going to put the cart ahead of the horse. I'm really focused right now on getting elected by the voters of Congressional District 3. I don't know who the choices are, and I certainly don't want to give any of my negotiating power away by making a decision before I know who the choices are.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tarkanian, you have come out against term limits, or rather in support of term limits, let me correct that. Pardon me, most recently in a TV ad featuring you and your entire family, and as you know, in a federal court in 1995 invalidated state-based efforts to do that, to impose term limits on members of Congress. So if elected, would you only commit to serving a certain number of terms in the House, and if so, how many?
Yeah.
1 minute.
First of all, I have, again, before the commercial break, my opponent made some misstatements I'm going to have to correct. If you follow her campaign, you're going to see it's very dishonest and deceives the public because she can't win on the issues we're talking about. I have never said that I was a reliable vote for Donald Trump because he endorsed me. In fact, I've only said I'm a reliable vote for the American First policies he's articulated because I believe those are the policies that are making our country a better place. And I would vote against Donald Trump when he wanted things that fell outside of those American First policies, such as the omnibus bill. Second of all, when you start talking about conning the people, there is no bigger con than running a campaign claiming that your biggest asset is running two nonprofits that take millions and millions of dollars from the public school system and from the city and the county taxpayers and use that in failing programs like MASH that failed, that the executive director said it didn't accomplish anything. They had small, ineffective board members, which my opponent was a member of.
Okay, I do need to ask then, as the follow-up, with 30 seconds, would you commit to term limits?
Oh, absolutely. I think, first of all, term limits can be passed in Washington, D.C. by passing a law and getting it ratified by 2/3 of the state legislature. So it can be done and it should be done. We have it in every other elected official in Washington, D.C. Yes, I would commit to term limits. I've said 12 years for a congressman and 12 years, 2 terms for a senator.
Okay, Mr. Tarkanian, thank you very much. We will be right back with closing statements from our candidates. Welcome back for the final part of this debate. We will have closing statements. You each have 30 seconds, and there is no rebuttal time. Mr. Tarkanian, you may go first.
My family and I have lived in this community for 45 years. I've spent most of my adult life trying to make this a better community and a better country. The place I think I could make the most effect, the most positive effect for the people of Southern Nevada and for our country is in Washington, D.C. because Nevadans need someone who will stand up for the middle-class, hard-working Nevadans, someone who's a fighter, someone who will never quit, someone who can take the punches but keep defending and fighting for what's best for the people of Nevada. I hope that when you go to the polls to vote in November, you will vote for Danny Tarkanian for Congress in District 3.
Ms. Lee, you have 30 seconds for your closing statements.
Okay, before I do that, I want to invite voters to go to the website tarkaniantruth.com to support any statement I made about my opponent tonight. Listen, I'm a mother of 2. I've been a longtime education advocate and a nonprofit leader of successful nonprofits here in this community. Washington quit working for working families a long time ago. I've rolled up my sleeves, I've taken on big problems and produced results here in Nevada for 25 years. That's exactly what I want to do in Washington, and I hope I earn your vote.
All right, that's where we will leave it. We have run out of time.
We'd like to sincerely thank both candidates for participating in today's Congressional District 3 debate. Debates are a staple of running for office, but participation is certainly not required. And so when candidates do agree to participate, the information that voters get, we think, helps them make a decision when they go to the polls. So we at 8 News Now want to encourage everyone to go to the polls, get registered, get educated, and vote.
Early voting starts October 20th. Election Day is November 6th. Again, if you want to watch the full debate, including last week's first half, go to LasVegasNow.com, click on News, and it's the Your Local Election Headquarters tab there in the News section. Thank you so much. Have a great night, a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you back here next week.
With the control of Congress in question,